state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Campbell Brown, B-R-O-W-N.
Thank you, have a seat.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Brown. Prosecutor, you could start your direct examination of this witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Brown, by whom were you employed?
Jackson Township Police Department.
And how long have you been a police officer in Jackson Township?
8 years.
And let me direct your attention to January 14th last year. Were you on duty that day?
Yes, I was.
And did you, along with several other Jackson Township police officers, respond to the Lakewood Township Police Department to assist with the officer who was shot?
Yes, sir. And then for photo number 1, as indicated below, he stated out of these pictures, that would be the one. Those are the cheeks. That's the nose, too.
And you wrote that out for him?
Yes, sir.
And that's exactly what he said?
That's exactly what he said.
And did he agree with you after you wrote that out? That that's what he said?
Yes, sir.
And did you ask him to sign this sheet to verify that that's what he had said?
Yes, sir.
Detective Bauman
Yes, sir.
provided you the 6 pictures?
That's correct.
That's B-A-L-M-O-N?
I believe so.
Had you not met him before?
No, I've met him before. I used to work in Lakewood.
Okay, no further questions.
Judge, I have one omitted question.
Yes.
Detective, did you have any idea either who a suspect might be or whether a suspect was included in this lineup?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you.
Anything, as a result of those questions? All right, you can step down. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir.
You will.
Scott Fry, F-R-E-Y.
Thank you, sir, have a seat.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fry.
Good afternoon, Judge.
Prosecutor, you received your direct examination of this witness.
Thank you, Aaron. Detective Fry, could you please tell the jury where you're employed and what capacity?
I work for the Ocean County Sheriff's Department as a road detective in the crime scene unit.
What is the crime scene? Is it often referred to as the Ocean County Sheriff's Department Criminalistics
Criminalistic
Unit?
Investigation Unit, correct.
What do you guys do?
Basically, we go out and we document crime scenes, collect evidence, take photos, and process that evidence.
On January 14th, I guess, we'll start there, was the Ocean County Sheriff's Department Criminalistics Investigation Unit called out to a scene at 1514 August Drive?
Yes.
And what was the purpose for that call out?
There was a Lakewood police officer shot and killed.
And your office was responsible for processing that crime scene, is that correct?
Correct.
You were not the lead detective from the CIU department, is that correct?
No, I was not.
That was Detective Stephen
Capuano.
Capuano.
Yes.
However, at Detective Capuano's request, you took several photographs on January 15th, is that correct?
Correct. The following day.
Where were the photographs we're about to talk about taken from?
They were taken from a state police helicopter.
What date and time approximately were the photographs taken at?
They're taken on January 15th at approximately 1:45 p.m.
So less than 24 hours after the murder or the shooting had taken place.
Correct.
I'll show you what's been marked S66 for identification. You recognize that?
Yes.
And actually, S66 in evidence. And this is S1 in evidence. You recognize this?
Yes.
And I'm just going to pull S66 in evidence up on the television.
All right.
There's no objection, so the jury can see what we're talking about.
No objection.
Are these two photographs, S1 and S66, once it comes up? If it comes up. No, it's, I fixed the remote last night. There we go. These are two of the photographs you took, is that correct?
Yes.
How high up in the helicopter were you when you took them?
Approximately 600 to 700 feet.
And both of these photographs are of the area around August Drive, is that correct?
Yes.
S1 would be, fair to say, a close-up of August Drive, and you can see a corner of Gulfview and Joe Parker Road over here, is that correct?
Correct.
Long Beach Drive.
Yes.
And S66 in evidence is a further out shot, is that fair to say?
Correct.
And once again, you see kind of Wood Lake Country Club in the background,
Yes, sir.
and Golfview Apartments and Joe Parker.
That's correct.
And these are accurate depictions of the photographs you took?
Yes, sir.
And they were taken once again within about 1:45 PM on January 15th of 2011, correct?
Correct.
Well, I have, Your Honor.
Any cross-examination, Mr. Fury?
None.
You can sit down,
Thank you.
Mr. Oath will be upset with me if I don't package it properly again. That's 44, which is the one from the neck.
And it's item 44, but the exhibit number is S8.
43, which I believe is the one from the nose, is exhibit number 79, S79.
Prosecutor, is that coming from a different item bag?
Yes,
Which one is that?
S79, I believe the doctor just said.
Okay.
And here we have the same kind of thing. It's a same size, at least to look at grossly, lead bullet with a very little copper wash left on it. In fact, I couldn't even tell looking at this one that it was copper washed. But at least, unlike the other one, it has actually retained its lands and grooves even better. So it's a somewhat less distorted bullet. Very chewed up at the end because of what it went through. And that's probably where it hit the teeth. And in fact, I got a little fragment out of there, I know, at autopsy, which may or may not be included with it. It was so tiny. But that, as you can see, looks much the same as the, at least in terms of size, as the other bullet. It's a little different in terms of its shape. It has less of a dish in the base than the other bullet did. But nonetheless, they would both be quite capable, I'm sure, of being fired from the same weapon. That was S79, bullet number 42, 43, I beg your pardon, which is now 42, which is the one from the left temple that was fired at closest range.
Is that coming from S78?
Yes, Judge.
Yes, it is, Your Honor. And again, we have much the same size bullet when you look at the base, and this is more like the first one that went in through the neck. It's got a dish in the base, unlike the other one. And it is much more copper washed. I think they call them luballoy, because that's on there to make them slip down the barrel of the gun better, that copper wash. And again, we have, you can't see it from where you are on the jury stand, but it has nice lands and grooves, which means that the ballistician has got a good opportunity to make a comparison when you have that kind of material left on a bullet. Even though the front end of it, as you can see, is very chewed up because it struck bone.
Okay, and the word you're using, Doctor, is ballistician?
Yes.
That's the
Or,
person who's going to examine the projectile to determine the ballistic characteristics of it?
yes, and compare it with any other. In this case, they'd be comparing it with the three bullets all against each other to see if they were fired from the same weapon. Or if you're lucky enough to have the weapon, then you actually compare it with a test-fired bullet from that weapon, and then you can actually say that it came out of that particular weapon. But here, all three of these bullets appear to have reasonably good lands and grooves, so a ballistician would have a good chance that this belongs in that package too. Here's the fragment that goes with it.
Okay, that was,
42A, the last one, 42.
yep, here we go. First off, without describing, I'm just gonna ask you, S4, S5, and F6, if they were taken at the autopsy before you did your internal examination?
They were. The blue glove there is probably my hand.
Okay, and we'll put them up on the screen in a second. And two of those are the interior of the police car showing blood?
a considerable quantity of it over the left side of the driver's seat and over the steering wheel.
And the third photograph is of Officer Matlos's shirt.
Correct, and this is one, I actually saw that shirt, and it is considerably blood-soaked over the front, consistent with him slumping forward and all of that blood coming out of his mouth and nose onto the front of it.
Can we have the TV, Mr. Weatherstone, please? Now, that photograph is S14, the inside of the police car. For our purposes here, you make some observations of blood inside the car?
Yes, the driver's side door has been opened, but the picture has been taken through the passenger's side. So you can see the blood down the side nearest the door. The blood smeared down the door frame, and there's quite a bit of blood over the steering wheel. This may have been his hat, but it wasn't the one he was wearing. It was a knit cap that he had when he was shot.
And this would be S15.
An S15 is just a shot of the same area, but taken now through the open driver's window, driver's door. And again, you can see the blood that's soaked into the left side of the driver's seat. And now we get a better shot of some of the blood that's dripped down onto the steering wheel, and some of it's gone onto the console, and some onto the seat bottom itself.
Can you offer an opinion as to which shot was fired first in that scenario?
If the person's moving closer to him, then obviously the first shot fired will be the furthest away, and in this cluster of 3 shots, that would be the one to the back of the neck.
Now, between the shot to the nose and the shot to the temple, if those shots were fired after the person moved closer in, can you tell us what order those shots were fired in?
Not with 100% reliability, because the nose is in fact about 2.5 inches or so further away from the weapon than the temple would be since the gun is facing the temple. But there is still a bigger spatter of gunpowder stippling than I would expect for a simple 2.5-inch distance in change in distance. So it would be more likely, I can't say 100%, but much more likely that if the person's continuing to move forward or pushing the gun closer and closer to the victim as he shoots him, then this one would be the second, and this would be the final sort of coup de grace wound, although in fact all 3 of these wounds were quite capable of causing instant unconsciousness and very rapid death, and did do so.
Okay, his cause of death was gunshot wounds to the head,
Correct.
and his manner of death is homicide.
Correct.
Thank you, Doctor. That's all I have.
Any cross-examination of this witness?
Just a bit, please, Judge. Good afternoon, Doctor. My name is Mark Cleary. I have a couple questions.
Good afternoon.
In fact, in your business, any manner of death other than accidental is generally deemed homicide, is it not?
No, we do suicides, homicides, accidents. In fact, about half the cases we do turn out to be natural, but there's just no doctor to sign a death certificate for them.
Okay, so you would say that of the cases that you see each year, if it's not an accident, and it's not a suicide, and there's no other explanation, frequently you'll rule it a homicide?
No, it's not a matter of exclusion. You actually have to have a reason to be dead of a particular cause before I'll call it a homicide. There are a few exceptions. If I find totally skeletonized remains buried in a clandestine grave out in the Pinelands, which I do about once a year or so, and it's found to be a young person, then I will assume that whatever was done to them was homicidal, because why would you bother going to all that trouble to bury the body?
Or another example might be if you found somebody at the foot of a steep drop, there would be fractured skull and such, and then you'd make a determination whether there was blunt force trauma from some source other than what the person landed on, or whether the fall itself is what killed, right? I
would try to, but that's often very hard. And that would be a classic example of that could be any one of those 3 common manners. That could be a suicide, they could have jumped, they could have fallen, in which case it would be an accident, or they could have been pushed, in which case it would be a homicide. Unfortunately, that all look the same.
And therefore, homicide is a term of art in your business, right?
It's, well, it's a manner of death. As forensic pathologists, we get frustrated with and have fun with those. We make up various scenarios about how you can change the manner depending on what the person's doing every split second. It's just a statistical term. When I call something a homicide, it's a matter of vital statistics. It means that somebody died as the result of the willful or grossly negligent actions of another. It may not necessarily, because it's willful, may not necessarily mean it gets prosecuted as a homicide. If somebody fires at somebody in self-defense, it may be considered excused and no prosecution will take place, but I would still call it a homicide for statistics purposes on a death certificate. We are required to.
And in fact, you don't use terms like murder and manslaughter, right?
No.
That's a legal determination for the courts to make, yes?
Correct.
Second question, I hesitate to ask it, but I have to. If, as you say, it is likely that Officer Matlos's heart continued to beat for several minutes, maybe even up to 15, I think you said, after he received these 3 ultimately fatal wounds. You said that a person could flail or flop about quite a bit, yes?
Yes.
Is it likely that such a person could open the door with a police car from the interior, or is that a conscious action that they would no longer be able to take?
It would depend on how easy it is to open that door. If it requires just one blow from a flailing hand to actually open it, then they could just coincidentally open it as they flail around. If it requires more deliberate action than that, then no.
Okay, so we just don't know that, right?
Correct.
Could you tell anything from the pictures that you saw about the blood stains on the steering wheel? Were you able to determine whether that came from his condition after being shot, or whether it arrived there by way of the people trying to get him out of the car? Do you have any idea?
Just looking at those images, which is all I have seen, it appears to be dripped and run down as opposed to smeared, whereas I think some of the blood on the door frame looks smeared as though it was in fact done as they dragged him out.
Now, glad you said that. There was some blood spatter on the door, was there not? Did you see that picture?
Yes, there was some down on the below the level of the window, I believe.
Yeah, I guess I said. Showed it earlier, but this one? No, there's one with just the door. No, keep going. That's a back. Okay, no problem. You mind if I go? Let me show you what's been marked as S17 and ask you to take a look at it.
There's definitely droplets of blood scattered over this door. I can't tell which door it is, but there's definitely a pattern of blood splatter over that door. It would be entirely consistent with the being the driver's side door.
Okay. Now, as an expert, one of the things that you're allowed to do that lay witnesses are not allowed to do is answer hypotheticals and give opinions, right?
Yes.
Okay. Would you give me an opinion as to whether this was blood spatter that resulted from the gunshot or some other cause?
All I can say is it's a pattern of flying blood droplets that's produced that pattern. It's not smeared. There have been basically aerosolized droplets of blood that have then hit the door to produce that pattern. Most commonly that would come from a bullet entering the head. You get a certain amount of splatter coming out. You can, however, especially in this kind of a case, get it being coughed out because he's got so much damage to the back of his mouth and nose. I would be inclined to say in this case, because I know the circumstances of how the body was found seated in the car and what the wounds did to him behind his mouth and nose, that that's the most likely source of those blood splatters.
Like you're saying, this was coughed out?
Most likely, but I don't know where that is, if that's the driver's door, and I'm not sure that it necessarily is.
And if in fact this is the rear driver's side passenger door, would your your opinion change about the source of the?
Not necessarily, because I know he flopped around and was seizing, and I haven't seen the whole car. It's entirely possible that there's splatter like that all around that car if his head's been moving around as he's seizing.
You can see, would you not, that this appears at least to be a left side door, yes?
I don't know about the orientation. If it's a rear door,
Mhm.
it probably is because it's had the lock taken out.
Lock taken out.
Police cars. And this is
No,
the hinge side. I
yes.
don't, again, I don't know about this particular vehicle, whether the hinge is facing the front of the vehicle or the back. So I can't
Say with any certainty?
say with any certainty what the relationship of this area is to Officer Matloss.
Okay, now, holding that in mind for a second, could I ask you to display S13? Now, I probably should have said this while it was up there, but you noted that the door in question in S17, now D2, did not have a lock, right?
Correct.
And from the angle that the picture was taken, at least, the hinges are to the forward, such that if this is the door in question, the hinges would be here, right?
That's what I couldn't tell from looking at the image because it's too cropped. But if that's the case, then that splatter pattern that we were looking at would be down here.
Right. And we're now looking at S13.
Mr. Ford, I don't think one of yours is.
We're now looking at S13, clearly the driver's side door of the vehicle, yes?
Yes,
And here we see that there are controls for the windows and stuff like that, right?
correct.
So at least we can eliminate the driver's side door from consideration in the S17 D2 picture, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, just looking, and this may not be very close up, but do you see any blood spray on the inside driver's side door?
Certainly not to the level that it was on the picture you just saw on the, I presume, this door, the driver's side rear door.
Right. So in order then to accomplish the, let me go back to this one. Please. Great, thank you very much. So in order to accomplish the blood spray pattern displayed in this picture, by coughing, the Officer Matlos would have had to flop in such a way as either to reach around the seat or over and backwards. Is that correct?
Over his left shoulder, and I don't know, there may even have been a barrier up here between the two. If so, I have no clue how you get that blood spatter back there. There has to be some open avenue between his head, which is where the blood's coming from, and this area. As I said at the outset, one of the ways you can get this kind of splatter pattern is from a direct wound. Not common. It's nowhere near as common as you see on television where you get this great spray of blood. You only get that out of exit wounds, not out of the entrances. But occasionally you do get some. That would be a lot, which is why, as I say, in my experience, it would be more like what you see in somebody who's actually expectorating little bubbles of blood. And if he happened to turn his head over his shoulder, he could do that.
Now, let me ask you this question. Based on the wounds as you saw them, he would have to contort himself quite a bit to cough over his shoulder to make this spray, wouldn't he?
I don't know without looking at that car more closely as to how direct a shot it is down there to that area. That's what I was somewhat curious about, because in many police cars there is a complete barrier between the passenger's rear compartment and the front, and you just wouldn't be able to get that blood splatter by any means because there's just no hole for the blood to go through. But at least this does show that there is an open area over the back of the driver's seat, or there appears to be.
Now, as you look at this S7, and again, it's not the closest picture, but do you see any blood spatter on the back seat or or riser that would be consistent with coughing?
I don't see any blood, period, back there. Again, it's not the best picture, and it's mostly of the passenger side and not the driver's. So it doesn't, and I don't even know if this picture was taken. I'd have to look at the time and figure out if it was taken after he'd been shot. It's January 14th, and it's at 4:14, so I presume therefore it was taken after he was shot.
But you would agree with me that you don't really see any blood at all in the back seat. That would be consistent with him leaning over and coughing, right?
Well, he'd have to cough a lot further than here to be able to do that. That would be like a 3-foot landing pattern behind him, and I would be surprised if he managed to expectorate that far.
In fact, the bottom line is you just don't know how that blood got there, right?
Well, the only thing I can say is the only source of blood we have is Officer Matloss's head, so it had to come from there. It's a spatter pattern. It's not what you get from smearing. It's definitely been caused by high velocity, or relatively high velocity droplets of blood. They can be caused, in this situation, really, well, there is a third mechanism. The first mechanism would be the bullet, in this case it would be the one that goes in the back of the neck. You get some blood spatter.
Could you slow down just a bit for the report?
Sure. You get some back spatter from the blood, of blood as the bullet enters the neck. It's closest to this area, so that would be certainly conceivable. It's just more than I'm used to seeing from bullet entry wounds. You see it more from exits. It could be from him seizing and spluttering and happening to have his head that way, and it ends up down there. Why it's not also over the inside of the driver's door, I don't have a good explanation for. And the other way you can get this kind of high velocity splatter has nothing at all to do with him being shot. If there's a spongy area, like if you take a sponge and fill it up with blood and then hit it, you'll get this kind of splatter pattern. I don't know that there's a good demonstration in that car, or a good area where that could have happened in that car. You'd have to do that experiment and try it and see. If you get a blood-soaked seat right in front of here and have to whack it, do you get that kind of splatter pattern? You'd have to do that experiment to find out.
Thank you very much. You please feel free to return to your seat, because I haven't done this. I do have one other set of questions for you. You described Officer Matloss as 27 years old and up to that moment healthy, correct?
Yes, the only condition that he had, as I said, was the alopecia.
Very good. And you listed him as of stocky build, yes?
Yes, he was not tall, which is one of the reasons why that area was relatively confined. He had the driver's seat pulled a little further up than would say a 6'1" person.
And in fact, how tall was he, according to your measurement?
I had him as 5'8", and we weighed him at about 217 pounds.
In fact, because I know you are one who loves exactness, did you not list him as 67.5 inches?
5 feet 7.5, that sounds correct, yes. I think I may have been kind and moved it up to 5'8" for the report.
Yeah. But the actual measurement was 67.5 inches, or 5'7.5", yes?
But we're measuring the body as it's lying. Hopefully somebody, I'm sure on his driver's license, he has his actual standing height.
Approximately 7.5, 5'8".
Correct.
And 217 pounds,
Yes.
which you judge to be a stocky build.
Well, you can be obese at 5'8" and be 217 pounds. In his case, that was not the case. He was fairly heavily muscled. He was well built and stocky, not obese.
Okay. You certainly would not consider 5'7.5" or 217 pounds to be of medium build, would you?
That's a judgment call. One person's medium is another person's large. I would describe him just as I did. He's not tall, but he's heavily built. So rather than of medium build, I would say he's medium to heavily built in terms of muscle mass.
So you would call it stocky?
Yes.
And you think most people would too, right?
Yes.
No further questions, thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Your Honor.